My life is a miracle. Every child has a story of God's love to share. Shalom World, tune into God's love story.
Our first step is to get our heart right and to come to that space, to take off our shoes, to bring the eyes that welcome and accept, to come as guest. And in this guest, it is a beautiful giving and taking. We give, but we also are given back to. In this series, we look at encounter in the marketplace. We look at a way of being the spiritual person there. Our world is longing for a culture of encounter, for people who are prophets of hope, of love, people who make a difference within our world, and to make that difference in the marketplaces of our life. In those marketplace times, in the ordinary times, in the extraordinary. And when we engage our hearts and truly encounter, we can bring that heart to the table, to our own particular Eucharistic table. We want to begin this series by a sense of guest, because the first step is to come as a guest. Guestness is how we come. It is a particular mindset, a heart set, one that senses the sacred ground, that knows the innate dignity of the one that we encounter. And the guest comes openly, humble. We take off our shoes because we walk on holy ground. And in the marketplace, in the ordinary places and the ordinary times, with the so-called ordinary people that will make up our day, our first step is to get our heart right and to come to that space, to take off our shoes, to bring the eyes that welcome and accept, to come as guest. And in this guest, it is a beautiful giving and taking. We give, but we also are given back to. It's a space of sacred story. And we've got to be aware, if we're going to come as guests, we've got to be aware of the ego voice, the voice which is not of love. We must come with a humility. We clear the space of our preconceptions, and we do not rush in. The guest comes slowly, humbly. We hold lightly. And when we come slowly, we are more attuned. We hear more. We see more. One of the most profound encounters that I've ever had in the marketplace of my own life. I was working in a school, and this beautiful young lady that I had taught, I taught her when she was 14 and when she was 15. At the end of her 15th year, she went to some other school, and I heard at the end of her senior year that she and a lot of the other young people, they went away, and there was a whole series of parties. And at one of these parties, 2 young men sexually assaulted her. The following year, I'd finished my particular class, and I came back, I put my particular books down, and there was a knock on my door, and I looked up, and this young woman was standing there. She stepped into my office, and she burst into tears. And I can remember getting up from my desk and walking around, and I had heard rumours of what had happened to her. So I walked over and I hugged her. And she fell into my arms and she just held me like a vice. And her body was shaking and her tears were just running. And she put her head onto my shoulder and she cried and cried, tears of hurt, of anger, of shame. And all I could do was come to her pain as a guest. All I could do was hold her, for as a man, I have no idea of her story, of her pain. And we stood there and I held her. And after 5 minutes or so, I got a couple of chairs and we sat down and I held her hand as gently as I could. And I just said, I'm sorry. And then I had a friend who could walk with her and I rang up my friend and said, will you work with this beautiful girl? That was a time of guest, of how I came to that marketplace encounter. So in this guestness, we come in a truly respectful way. We are aware of the labels of the marketplace and we see beyond those. We focus on the other, on their sacred ground, on their sacred story. And one of the beautiful things about guestness, the crap detector does not go off in the other senses that we've come as guests. Another time I was working with homeless people. And there was a student was working on the van and we were serving meals and there were these homeless women and men. And there was a elderly gentleman over to the side, sitting on his own. And one of our students, James, he went over and I could see this actually happening. And the man was sitting on a bench and James went and sat on the ground next to him. And I was watching this and they did not say a lot. And after a few minutes, James got up and went and got a cup of tea for him. Anyway, 2 weeks later, we were there again at the same spot and there was James and the elderly man was over there again. And I saw James go over and sit on the ground again. So I said to James, what were you doing there? He said, well, sir, that was his space. That was his turf. I had to come as guest. I couldn't just go and just sit down next to him and talk really loud. So James chose to sit there in silence with him to build up a sense of oneness. And then after a few minutes, just to say, would you like something to eat? And slowly James built up trust. He came as a guest to that sacred ground. And after he'd met him a couple of times, one day he said, "G'day, my name's James." And the old man said, "My name is Sid." And they had this beautiful talk. James truly, in that marketplace time, came as guest. So this time within our planet 2, with the earth, we're called to come as guest. The sacred ground of the earth is calling out to walk lightly. The indigenous people of Northern Australia have a beautiful word, dardiri, deep inner heart listening. So the guest comes with soft eyes, with non-judgment eyes, with, beside you eyes. And the touch of the guest is gentle and accepting. And our ears, it is a gender-free listening. We listen with the heart, not with the ego. And there's space for silence. And in the silence, we go deep within to that spirit place. And the Spirit will give us the words. The Spirit will give us His words, her words, the words of the heart. Jesus is the ultimate guest. How he encountered, how he came to the Syrophoenician woman, how he came to the leper, to the woman caught in the very act of committing adultery. So what Jesus does over and over again, he goes to the edge space. And in the edge space, he comes gently, slowly. He encounters. And he comes into that space in a way that the other knows he is with them. He is beside them. He's not above them. And from that space, he calls forth life. It's how Jesus comes. And it's that howness, that sense of presence, that sense of the sacred ground that invites a response. And in that beautiful scene, the woman is thrown down onto the actual ground, and the priests and them are gathered around, and they have their stones, they're about to kind of stone her. And Jesus steps into the circle of judgment, the circle of real anger and hate. He says, whichever one of you is without sin, throw the first stone. And beautifully in the scriptures, they go away, the older ones first. And then he does something that a Jewish man would never do. He's left alone with a woman who is not his own spouse. And he steps into the circle and he says, woman, has nobody condemned you? Nobody, sir. Neither do I. Go in peace. He has entered that space as a guest. She has sensed it. His guestness has created the space for healing, for encounter, for unconditional love. It is a beautiful space. The guest trusts the heart in the encounter. When we're focusing on ourselves, it's our words. But when we focus on the other, and we focus on the guest space within us, God gives us that right word. The Spirit is at work. In the scriptures, Jesus encounters the widow who's lost her only son, and the funeral procession is leaving the town. And again, Jesus encounters. And again, what he does is, as he comes over, it's how he comes. He comes to her pain slowly. She senses that in this space of pain, he is beside her. And in the stories which he shares, the Samaritan, the good Samaritan, the prodigal son, they are all stories around guestness. But one of the most profound ones is the Samaritan woman who comes to the well. So here she comes seeking water. The other women, the kind of respectable women, have come early in the day. And the apostles, the disciples, have gone off into the town. So she comes there. He's tired, he's been journeying, he's flopped down by the well. This encounter takes then place. And what does he do? He comes as guest to the woman in a patriarchal world, to the Samaritan woman, the foreigner, the one that the Jew does not want to be with, but the one who comes to the well at the noon hour, the outcast hour, while the respectable women have come early in the day. And Jesus gently encounters. He knows her story. He senses her pain. And it's this way of coming into the space that truly liberates. This story points us to this time on our planet when so many are on the outer. So many young people are searching for meaning, searching for a sense of purpose. So many people are really lost. So when we're in the marketplace, when we encounter those people who are searching, when we come to their sacred story, and when we come gently, slowly, respectfully, humbly, in an open way, they sense something beautiful. They sense an invitation to share story. And in that beautiful space, encounter happens. And it's an invitation that takes us beyond, takes us to the heart of God. Because that's the space of the ultimate guest, the God who sits and waits, the God who waits for our invitation, the God who, like the father in the prodigal son, longs for and waits for, and when he sees the son returning, runs, embraces, puts ring on finger and sandals on feet. Did you notice what the Father does? He doesn't say, well, son, I told you so. He doesn't engage him with anger or hurt. There's total acceptance. Welcome home. My son who was lost has been found. And because of that sense of guest, he can go into table, and at table break open word. So there is an intimate link between our guestness in the marketplace and the Eucharistic table. And the Eucharistic table, that word of God there, is intimately linked into the marketplace moments of our week, our day. And when we bring that guest heart and we gather around table, God speaks deeply. And from that space, we go back out. And we go back out with guest eyes in a way that we may not have had them before. We go back out with a guest heart. We have guest touch. Our whole spirit becomes alive, and we become Christ's hands and eyes and feet. And as we go out, we truly encounter in a way that our world is longing for. And then the others in the marketplace will look across at us and say, See how they love one another. When I was with them, did not my heart burn within me? Did not I sense something more, something beyond? Did not my heart feel healed, accepted, held, loved? That's the gift of the guest. That's the gift of the guest that comes alive in the marketplace of your life and of mine.
A lot of talk in our church today about the new evangelization, and we might ask, well, what's new about the new evangelization? One thing that's new is that we're trying to renew the faith in people who should already be Catholic, should already be Christian. Individuals, families, communities, whole cultures that need to rediscover the gospel. And so what's new is that they're getting a new shot in the arm of faith, of evangelization. But another thing that's new about it is the way that we do that. And the new media and groups like Shalom World TV are very important for bringing the gospel anew to our cultures, to our families, to each of us individually. And so I encourage all the viewers of Shalom World TV, and I encourage Shalom World TV themselves to keep up the good work, to keep watching this channel and to keep up the good work of presenting the Catholic faith to our world today.